What's up, my martial arts nerds? Welcome back. It's System Breakdowns. As always, I'm Greg Koval with Devil Dog Martial Arts, and today we're talking about TJ Dillashaw, who's a great case study for systems. Of course, we're talking about here not technique selection and stuff like that, but how guys build systems that play to their strengths that allow them to be successful. And this is a great case study because this is a guy who is a Division I NCAA wrestler who worked with guys like Dwayne Ludwig to really develop a style that really plays to his strengths in wrestling. And it's a system that allows him to be successful. And there's a couple things about his system that are fantastic in terms of limiting the amount of damage that he takes while giving him opportunities to use that wrestling. That's why he's a two-time bantamweight champ who is getting ready to probably have another championship shot with Aljamain Sterling after his victory over Corey Sandhagen. So this is going to be a great case study. I'm excited to present this, and I hope that you enjoy it. So that being said, stay tuned. Let's start getting into it. Okay, so let's start talking about some of the basic movements, offense, defense, stuff like that with TJ Dillashaw. The first thing I want to talk about that is probably my favorite thing about him is that on the outside, he's neutral until it's time to enter into range, and then he picks a side. It makes it much harder for his opponent to determine how to defend this when you're not sure how they're going to enter. If I enter in straight, it makes it easier for him to do counter leg kicks, check hooks, whatever. But if he's not even sure which side I'm going to enter in on, it makes it very challenging for him to deal with. This, combined with the regular stance switching that he does frequently in his attacks, is a nice way of entering range while keeping himself safe. Meanwhile, from the edge of the range, it's a lot of head movement so that it's hard to kind of pin him down until he decides to advance forward. Now, from right here, what he's going to do is a lot of level changes and a lot of angle changes in his striking. You're going to see this as a common trend. He's going to drop low to hit his strikes. He's going to switch stance, and he's going to step to the outside a lot. A lot of pivoting out from right here so that as he's on the outside, head movement, footwork, step in, and come to the outside to give him better access. This is both good for striking and for his takedowns. It's always better to be on this back corner where you can't get hit, but you can attack them kind of at will. Some of his early striking that you'll see out of him is going to be a lot of things like from the left foot forward particularly, you'll see leg kicks he'll attack a lot. But he generally tends to prefer most of his time in southpaw. Why? Because he's a wrestler. Wrestlers who are right-handed prefer to be right foot forward to give me better access to shoot at any time. This is both good because offensively he can use it, but it's also a nice threat so that opponents have a hard time staying in the pocket with him. They're always a little bit afraid whenever he moves into the range. And he likes to stand in the pocket by being low, making it hard for them to access him. This is a very challenging area for his opponent then to fight out of because he's too low to easily access, but he's also kind of in their face. And so this creates a nice attribute where between that and the angle out, it's very tough to kind of deal with this style. From here, he also likes to be in southpaw because it gives him a lot of access to kicking the liver, right? We talked about this before. If you're going to do a lot of kicking from the outside, it's good to be southpaw because it gives you access. Now, he'll do body kicks to kind of start setting things up and landing stuff from the outside, but he also does things like he'll set them up by throwing a cross here and putting a kick behind it. This is very similar to like what Bas Rutten does where he swings the hand and throws the kick behind it. TJ Dillashaw is really good at this as well, where he comes forward, right hand throws the cross and throws the left kick behind it. Once he throws the body kick a couple times, you can be sure he's thinking about head. And what he's trying to do is get them to drop the hands. He did this to Cody Garbrandt, where he got him to just start dropping that elbow a lot. And as he comes in here, once he throws the body kick a couple times, then he can start going to the head. It's a very nice tactic, level changing from a southpaw, especially when his opponents are more concerned with his hands and his takedowns. So he uses this, but he doesn't overuse it, and I really like that. He's also really good at punctuating his combinations with a left foot kick. So as he's in here, as he switches, throws this, it's very common for him to punctuate as they start running away, letting them run into the kick. Why the left foot? Because most guys run to the weak side. They tend to run to their right. Even if he's southpaw, guys tend to run in this direction. So as he steps out, he can catch him with that left kick a lot, whether it's a high section or even just a midsection here. He gets a lot of use out of that punctuating roundhouse kick that at the end of combinations, he uses it to chase them with the chasing technique, the chasing roundhouse. Okay. So from here, he's going to start doing a lot of hands, and he's going to start coming in A lot of times, if he does enter left, he'll throw like a left-right, and then he switches. He doesn't stay orthodox very long. Most of his time is spent southpaw. So when he enters orthodox, it's mostly to be deceptive on which side he's going to enter. He's going to use this to create additional angle changes, to throw them off, to set up his drop shift, stuff like that. This way, it's just another thing that they have to contend with. But he generally tends to prefer southpaw for the most part, even if he will often enter orthodox and then switch. Now, I mentioned the drop shift a couple times. The drop shift is essentially just a switch stance to a cross. He uses this a lot. Particularly, he'll get to his orthodox here as he enters, and a lot of times what he does is he switches stance and he throws this left hand. This is a common entry of his, to drop his head down and switch stance to the left. Even from southpaw, he'll just do it without the stance switch and lead with that left hand a lot. But a lot of times from the outside, as he switches here, he's threatening here, and he does the switch stance cross, the drop shift, as he drops his head down. A lot of times from here, then he starts looking at angle changes. If they stay in range or if they back up, he starts chasing them with techniques. So let me explain that again. From here, he switches to the drop shift. If they start running away, he starts chasing them with a big hook. Or he starts chasing them with that roundhouse kick we talked about. But if they stay in the pocket, you're going to see him angle out to the outside now and kind of like switch and hit that outside angle. So either he chases them this way or he starts to come on the outside. Okay? Those are his primary kind of like entries into all of his techniques. In the next section, we're going to come back and talk about what he does off of that. Okay, so let's talk about how he builds off of this now into some combinations and counters and stuff like that. So what he does a lot of times is from right here, like I said, even if he enters left, he tends to want to switch. So we're going to kind of base this on the idea of dropping to the right with your right foot forward. This is where he generally prefers to be when he starts attacking with his combinations. If he's left foot forward, you might see a jab cross, but then you'll see something like a drop shift, or he'll just switch stance, or he'll disengage and re-enter right. Okay? So we're going to base most of these combinations on the idea of right foot forward. Now, I already kind of touched on the idea he tends to either chase or hit an outside angle. When he's chasing, from right here, this is where you start seeing that left hand coming behind it with another left, stepping into it. Or left hand to the right hook as they start running away. And once again, he can do this off the drop shift, so pop, pop, you'll see a lot of that type of stuff. Pop, pop. That's a common attack of his. And a lot of times, like I said, he will still punctuate with that roundhouse kick as they continue to run. But if they don't run away and they stay in the pocket, this is where he goes to his angle out attacks. This is where you start seeing things like he throws the left hand, comes out, hook cross. Or he might not even throw that left hand first. Maybe he throws his right, or maybe he just comes straight out. So he's out here, he throws his jab cross, he disengages, and then he comes in, pop, pop. And you see how he cuts the angle. So as soon as he steps forward, he steps and pivots out so that now he puts himself on that back angle with a great deal of ease. And it can be the hook cross, it can be hook uppercut, any variation of that. The punching, what he throws is almost less important than the movement that gets him there. The punches he throws is going to be based off of what his opponent gives him. Usually it's something like a hook cross, because as they're defending here, you're going to have more access here, right? You're going to open them up with the hook and have that cross behind it, very similar to what Shevchenko does. But it's almost kind of immaterial. If they guard up high, he can just as easily step, switch out, and throw an uppercut with a cross or with a straight behind it. It almost doesn't matter. It's mostly just here, right, getting to this outside angle if that's not available. But a common combination that you will see him do is as he steps forward, he's going to come up, hook cross, punctuate with that roundhouse kick behind it. And it's a nice combination. Now from there, you start seeing him level change within his combinations. This is where the wrestling comes in. You'll start seeing things like, as he enters in, throwing an overhand, going to the double leg. He can do this from either side, right? That stuff's always available for him. And what's nice is then he uses this to level change the opposite direction. He throws a big shot high to come low. He threatens low to come high, right? You'll see a lot of this type of stuff. threatening one way and then going the other. He comes in here, and then he starts to do things like knee pick, pop, pop, right? This is going to help set them up. If they don't deal with this threat, he's more than willing to engage and continue his takedown. But if they do start to engage in it, well, it's easy money, right? He can just transition right to his next technique if they start to defend. Okay? Then you start getting into some counters as well. So this is all going to kind of blend takedowns and counters together at this point. A couple things he does that I really, really like. One of my favorite techniques is as guys start coming in with punching, to slip out to the left side, and you can do this from either side and get the back. He did this to Corey Sandhagen a bunch, but he's done it to a bunch of other people too, where as they start coming through with this punch, he's dropping down, and he just basically does a duck under, and he comes out the back and gets a hold of him here. This technique is so fun to use. I use it a lot in my sparring. It's one of my favorite counters, so he has a lot of success with that. The other thing that he does that I really enjoy is he's one of the only guys I see do it. It's one of my favorite techniques in sparring is what I call the sweep through. Somebody throws a kick and he sweeps it through, lets it continue that motion, comes through and take the back. Or if they throw a turning kick, like what happened with Corey Sandhagen a bunch, as they start to turn into it, he just closes the distance and gets to the back, drives them back to the cage, right? That type of stuff works really, really well. He's very good at accessing the back. And so even if he attacks low and gets a single leg, you'll see him, and we'll talk about this in takedowns and cage work, he'll drive them back to the cage and use that to access the back. But in this case, he does it off his counters a lot too, because he's so low, as they come in, he can step through and take the back, or if they throw a kick, he can sweep it through and take the back, or if they do a turning back kick, he can just close the gap and take the back. That stuff's amazing. I really love the use of that. Now, other than that for countering, now, he does use some of the same stuff that everybody else is using. You know, he comes up here and then, like, check hookers are always available. But what he seems to prefer is to use his offense as a counter as well, right? So, as he's in here, right, from the outside, if they start to move forward, no problem. He can just engage in the same game plan. And this is what's beautiful about this. This offensive game plan that he uses for his entries is the same that he uses for counters. He doesn't have to have two different game plans, which is common for a lot of fighters. Where I go, okay, I throw my offensive combination, and then I throw a defensive technique, right? He throws one series, and that's it. He drops in. If they start to move for him, instead of him stepping forward to get to them, now, oh, okay, he just, pop, pop. He does the exact same movement if they move into his threat range. So it's one of the beautiful things that he does is that everything is one kind of cohesive system. He doesn't have to change a whole lot. All he has to do is enter the same way, whether it's offensive or defensive. So stay tuned in the next section. We're going to get a little bit more in depth on the takedowns and talk about some cage work and stuff like that too. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit more in depth on takedowns and clinching and stuff like that. Once again, this is, he's a Division I wrestler. He can adjust very easily, but he seems to have certain techniques that he really prefers to go to. He likes to get to the back a lot and really hug on the back whenever possible to start getting back here because it gives him a ton of control. It's obviously very safe, and he can dominate very easily from there. Even against very skilled wrestlers and jiu-jitsu guys, he's very good at getting to that position. We already talked about how a lot of times as guys start punching, when he drops in, he'll just come underneath and get to it, or he'll do sweep throughs, take those kicks, redirect them and get to it, that type of stuff. But also offensively against the cage, which you'll frequently see is things like when he goes for like a single leg or a double leg, you'll frequently see things like as he comes in here, he gets that leg and he drives them back to the cage. And what he tends to do is, he'll attack the legs and stuff like that, but he seems to prefer to shrug them off and get to the back. And what that looks like is from here, while he's down here attacking the legs, he takes his shoulder and he shrugs them forward and gets to the back control. This is a very common attack of his. And essentially what it does is while they're busy defending the legs, he takes that shoulder, shrugs their hips forward just enough, and then he gets to that back control. From there, what he tends to do is one of a couple things. In the worst case situation, he loses it, he comes up striking. Okay? So, as I get to the back here, if they've done everything right, they disengage, okay, I can strike him, but he can't strike me. A lot of times you talk about clinches against the cage. As we disengage, right, everybody has the ability to try to disengage with striking. But from a back, that's not the case. So in the worst case situation, I get to the back and I start hanging on here. If he does manage to disengage, let's say he inserts an elbow, starts framing out, as I come up, I can hit him with 2 or 3 good shots, but he very rarely can hit me with anything. Most of the time, he's just thinking about getting the hell out of there because I have so much control. And from a striking perspective, I'm hugely advantageous if we do happen to disconnect. Now, a lot of times what he does is he also makes them carry his weight. He starts attacking the knees or the back of the legs with his own knee strikes and stuff like that. And it hangs on there. And what's nice is that I don't have to put a ton of effort into this compared with a lot of other clinch positions against the cage. Man, for those of you who don't know, putting somebody up against the cage and keeping them there, this is a massive effort on my part. I honestly think it's much harder for the offensive person than it is for the defender, who can just kind of sit back and take their time. If I have to keep this guy pinned up, it's very challenging. But from a back control, now you're talking about a different situation where he's just kind of carrying my weight. And what's great about it is a lot of his best attacks are going to involve either getting this foot and tripping it to make him fall down, or just getting heavy and sitting back with them, forcing the fall and forcing the takedown. This is a very, very nice system that the fact that he can so consistently get to that back position says a lot about his wrestling, because he does it with ease too. So once again, a lot of times, even if he's not shooting directly for the back, which I love that he does, you know, he comes in here, switch, comes in here, takes the single leg, drives him back, attacks the legs, and then when he's ready, he gets his head across, shifts, and then he starts attacking the back control and just hanging out here, making them carry his weight so that he doesn't have to expend a ton of energy. And then when he's ready, he can kind of sit down and do it. If they do happen to disconnect, he can strike. Okay, so TJ Dillashaw is a very keep it simple, stupid kind of fighter where he doesn't like to overcomplicate it. So when he does get guys to the ground, you know, he's going to use his strong wrestling. But a lot of times, if he gets on top, he'll get to half guard, and then he's just going to throw bombs. And a lot of times he understands that in that division, their ability to stand up very quickly, there's only so much you can do about it at that weight class because guys are so explosive, they're so quick. It's really hard in that division to keep guys pinned to the ground the way that you can in like heavyweights, where you can use that Glover Teixeira type of a pressure at light heavyweight to really keep them pinned in a position so that it's hard to get up. At that weight class, everybody's so explosive, scrambles happen so much. I've noticed he tends to not get too attached to takedowns once he gets them. He gets the takedown, he scores his points, and then he gets to like a half guard, throws some bombs as long as he can, and if they happen to get up, they get up. Okay. And then he resets, he gets back to the back, and what he's looking for a lot of times is as they scramble back up to catch the back again and go back to hang on them. So they've done all this work to explode out and get back to their feet, only to have him on their back again. From the bottom, he's not a guy that I've seen on the bottom a lot. His wrestling is so good, and his style makes it very tough to take him down because he's always on the outside. He throws his shot, and then he gets back out, right? And he pressures forward a lot. He's so low, it gives him the opportunity to defensively be very strong with takedowns. When I'm down here all the time throwing my shots, it's very challenging, especially because his hands tend to stay low, which gives him underhook opportunities and stuff like that. It's very tough to kind of like match this and shoot on this guy successfully. So when he does come in, right, with his hands low and his head so far forward, it's very difficult to take him down. So it's very rare that he ends up on the ground. Usually what happens instead is in a scramble on the ground, guys might reverse position a little bit. This is what happened with Corey Sandhagen. But in those positions, man, he's so tough to submit. You know, Renan Barão tried to full lock him, got nothing. Corey Sandhagen tried that in the triangle, got nothing. He's a very tough guy to submit. So he's just one of those guys. He's patient. He takes his time, works his way out, gets back to his position, and you're just going to have a hard time finishing him. It's one of the reasons I'm so interested in him versus Aljamain Sterling, who's so good at back control. I think a guy like TJ Dillashaw is going to be very difficult to keep in a body triangle because I think he's going to be very active and very patient defensively, but then also active to escape and explode out. Because that's his style. He doesn't do a lot of offensive jiu-jitsu, but his defensive jiu-jitsu is fantastic. And more importantly, it's very tough to get to a superior position on him. When, you know, Corey Sandhagen went for that triangle on him, he was not in a good position on him when he went for it. Like, his head was down, and TJ Dillashaw was on top of him, flattening him out, and he happened to bring the legs up over top. And he went, okay, I guess I'll work my way out of this. Chunk, chunk, chunk. So it gives him a very good style because it's when you can maintain top position most of the time, you don't have to worry about as much submission threat when you're the guy on top throwing bombs. Overall, though, great system. Like I said, very wrestling heavy based, built around those attributes. Very difficult to fight somebody who fights this way. So it's all stuff that I wanted to put together because I thought it would be fun to build into your own system as things to consider when you're building your own system. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you smash the subscribe, share with your friends, all that fun stuff.